Good morning and welcome to St. Stephen's. It's good to see you today. I'm glad you can be with us. Now, again, if you joined us last week, you know that this summer we're trying out a new way of gathering online for this time in which we're just discussing what is the ongoing story, what is the bigger story of what we're learning about through Scripture during this season. So I'm hoping that you can you find this moment well. And we've been working through Mark primarily. So through this season, this is year B in the lectionary, which is Mark's year, though we get some good John, which is what we'll find. We'll find some John passages coming up in the next couple of weeks. But we've been making our way through Mark. And so now we're in the middle of chapter 6. And a big part, and we're now going to be returning back to one of the recurring themes that has been going on throughout this whole section of Scripture, and that is power. Jesus' power. And a particular aspect of this is Jesus' surprising power. That people have this vision of who Jesus is supposed to be. And yet, he turns out to be a little different than they anticipate. So, a little different. Let's say surprisingly, or shockingly, or even, as it says in one part, terrifyingly different than they anticipate. As followers of Jesus, that causes that may be a source of question or confusion, or it doesn't sit with what we know. And so being able to dive into that feeling and that thing that's happening here, I think helps us understand not just what's happening, but get a better understanding of what Jesus is really doing then and with us now. So let's dive right in. Today we get Mark, and this is a couple of pieces and that are sort of stitched together, and I'll describe why in a minute. But it's Mark 6:30 to 34, and then 53 to 56. So I'm going to try and read here and get it right. It says, "The apostles gathered around Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. He said to them, 'Come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest a while.' For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in a boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they hurried there on foot from all the towns and arrived ahead of them. As he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. When they had crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret and moored the boat. When they got out of the boat, people at once recognized him and rushed about the whole region and began to bring the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. And wherever he went, into villages or cities or farms, they laid the sick in the marketplaces and begged him that they might touch even the fringe of his cloak. And all who touched it were healed." So as I said at the beginning, we're now sort of returning to the basic story that we had been discussing before that interlude last week, that strange one with King Herod. But this piece, and it begins. We're sort of brought in right in the middle of a story. So we'll have to think back 2 weeks to remember what had been happening. And back then, you had a pair of stories in which Jesus went home, and there the people were just asking him all sorts of weird questions. They were not listening to Jesus or what he was trying to communicate. They kept being like, well, isn't this the carpenter's son? What good can he do? They were focused on who they thought Jesus was, which was still a little kid. And Jesus wasn't able to do anything there. He had no power there. So this Jesus with this powerful figure who can change the weather and make incredible things happen. This guy, they're like, this is the one? No. And he can't do anything. He has no power in his hometown. So there's something there. There's some sort of link between Jesus's power and belief, right? There's something to that. And it's not making it explicit. It's making it implicit, right? By putting him into a place where there is no belief. And what happens? There's no power. But how he responds to that moment becomes a teachable moment for his followers. He responds by essentially kicking the dust off of his sandals and walking away, saying, I can't do anything here. I can't make them believe. I'm going to go where I can make this happen. But instead of going and then himself doing miracles, he immediately goes and he takes his closest followers, who are disciples, which means they're students of his, and he is the rabbi, and they are disciples. They do what they are students. And he takes his closest students and he calls them apostles, and he makes them be like him. He gives them his power to heal, and he sends them out into the world to go do what he does. So they walk away, not as students now, but as teachers themselves, as pairs of sons of God, right? Sons of humanity. And they go out, and then they come back, and it's like, and there's this return. Then we get the interlude. So when we pick it up, this is them. We pick it up with the apostles gathered around Jesus and told him all they had done and taught. Right? So what we had was we found out that they went out into the world. We found out that they could do it. It said that they had exorcised many demons and healed many who were sick. So not only were they able to do it, they did it a lot, and many people were affected by it. It was a remarkable thing to have happen. But we didn't hear. They come back, and this is the testimony. They tell their teacher. Now they come back to be students again, and they say, this is what happened, teacher. This is a remarkable demonstration of something that I think we often lose track of, because it's a posture and a way of being that we don't spend very much time inhabiting ourselves, which is to look at our world and say, and with the eyes of a student and a teacher, that we inhabit both of those at the same time. And that's a big part of what it means to be a follower of Christ. So there's a way in which this is an important teaching. This is an important moment for us to follow and to listen to. That we have this teaching moment, that we are teachers and we are students. We are both. We are both following Jesus, and we are also being Jesus for other students. Right? That we get to do both at the same time. One doesn't replace the other. Right? It is simultaneous. But again, I think this is what we're doing. We're in the midst of this recognition of the power of Jesus, and that this power that he is doing, that he is now sharing with people, with just normal people. These aren't like the rock stars or the superstars. These were fishermen just a few days ago, right? And now they're running around the countryside being Jesus, doing miracles. It's important to recognize this relationship of Jesus being powerful with this participatory part in which we are part of that function. So, but there are a couple of things that struck me, and I want to share them with you because I think they're super fun to respond to. One is that they come back and they debrief with Jesus, right? They actually take the time to reflect on what they've done and they've seen. They've had this time to vocalize it. They get the time. It's a downtime. Like there's other stuff going on. They're being hounded and surrounded, but Jesus needs to pull them out of that and give them space. So there's something about this sort of this thing that we don't always do for us, is we launch into this tension beat of doing and resting. Like we think we have to go full tilt 99.9% of the time, and then we drop down and make sure we have our rest that 0.1% of the time. That there's something about that way of thinking that's sort of native to a lot of American culture, but that's not what happens here. That's not what Jesus demonstrates. He demonstrates the need to get away, even in the middle of what is obviously a crisis. Right? He does not allow that crisis thinking to always be to allow it to be there. Right? He does not allow whatever is a presenting crisis to be the thing that overrides the need to take a break, because the break isn't only to get sleep or to eat something. Though we've already heard in Scripture how there were times in which the crises kept going, they couldn't even eat. Right? So they couldn't even take care of their personal needs. The pressure was immense. So they need to take time. Just take time. That's one part of it. But the second part isn't just the time. It isn't just the sleep and the rest and the eating well, right? It isn't just that piece. It's actually to take time to reflect. Take time to process what we learned, talk through it with other people, get a sense of what happened. Because how many times have you gone through something really remarkable and never talked about it with anybody else? And you don't necessarily know if it's remarkable or not. You think it might be, but you're not sure. And then you start downplaying it. Oh, it wasn't a big deal. Everybody goes through this. And then you just ignore it and pretend it was no big deal. But if you actually had time to process it with other people, they're like, no, that is remarkable. You need to sit with that. You need to recognize this moment is a big deal. We need other people to help us with that. So this is a huge part of this moment. But, right, it says he has sympathy for them. So okay, we had this moment, let's keep going. And that sympathy leads to what's missing from the story and why we jump. It's the story we're going to talk about next week, which is the feeding of the multitudes, right? Sometimes known as the feeding of the 5,000. So they go and they do that, and then they have this other thing where they leave, right? They feed all these people, then they leave, get out of town. And they follow them there. Right? This is a story of being unsatisfied. Like our culture encourages us to be unsatisfied. That there's always something better, more. You know, I like to describe this as being taught by the world around us to work harder, not smarter. That work is so much more important than even the value of it, or even the sort of that you working is number one, and everything else becomes unimportant. And there's something deeply wrong with that, something deeply sick in that thinking. Now, there's also this other thing, and it's the last thing I want to talk about for this moment, is that we have these couple of callbacks, a couple of things that bring us back to what we were looking at earlier in the scripture. And one is that the apostles, when they went out into the world, they didn't just get the power that Jesus offers them to go and have and do the healing that Jesus does, but they also get the crowd's harassment like Jesus. In that section from 30 to 34, they are now getting swamped and crowded and pulled and shoved the way that Jesus was. People want a piece of them now too. So there's this interesting synergy between what's happening to Jesus with what is happening with the apostles in the midst of this. That the people are hungry to take from them, but not give or share with them. And now they're on the receiving end of that. There's something deep in that that's worth taking a few minutes to work with, right? But the other one is it happens in that second section. And it's something that struck me in a way that I can't say that it fully struck me before. But that last verse, I want to read it again. And wherever he went, this being Jesus, wherever he went, into villages or cities or farms, they laid the sick in the marketplaces and begged him that they might touch even the fringe of his cloak. And all who touched it were healed. Now, we don't have to go back that far. We just have to go back a couple of weeks, 3 weeks. That story that we heard, a pair of stories in which Jesus was asked to heal this leader's daughter who was dying, and then this woman who was hemorrhaging for more than a decade of her life grabs Jesus's cloak, believing that she could be healed if she just touched his clothes. Now, at that point in the gospel, this is remarkable because people weren't doing that. They were coming to the healer and they were expecting the healer to put his hands on them and heal them. And they're shoving, essentially they're shoving to get into that space. They're crowding around to try to get in Jesus's proximity, but they think that they need to be, there's like a mad rush to be in his presence. But she has this different outlook, and he commends her for her faith in this time when she grabs his cloak, and at that point it says that his power left him, and he looks around for who it was that did this. And the people and his followers are like, why does it matter? There's all of these people. Like, how are you supposed to find her, the person who did this? But he can tell. He can tell the person who stole the energy, who stole the healing from him and was healed. And this story is paired with another story about not telling people. Like, again, keep the secret. We don't want the crowds to know. We don't want the world to know this yet because we're not ready. We're not at that point yet. We don't want to endanger this other half, because an ongoing theme here is that the people have the wrong vision, right? They have the wrong set of understanding of what's happening. If they come in and think too much, if they know too much about the true scope of this power, they will be missing what this power is about. And so from the very beginning, he's constantly pairing what this is about with what is happening. And he doesn't want the what is happening to overshadow the what it's about. So here's this moment, this woman grabs him, this remarkable moment in which this remarkable amount of faith of this woman grabs his cloak and she is healed. Now, just a chapter later, all these people are trying to grab his cloak to get healed. It's not just a subtle little throwback to this moment, but it's a link that is fast forwarding something, right? Both the revelation of Jesus' power, that people are discovering more and more. He can't keep it secret. But it's still tied to that belief and Jesus' concern for where that belief goes, right? And we're going to be talking about that over the next 2 weeks. So please come back next week as we cover a bit more of this story. Now, as we will shift gears and tell that middle story, the feeding of the multitudes, but from the Gospel of John. Until next time, peace be with you.